is about a pair of Texas professors who are very, very upset right now. This is they're at the University of Austin. Their names are Daniel Bonavac and John Hatfield. Probably no relationship to the Hatfields and McCoys. I don't know, maybe. But anyway, they have petitioned a court to allow them to flunk their young women students who take a week or two off to get an abortion, or even a few days off to get an abortion. You know, miss class for a couple days. They wrote, pregnancy is, in this court filing, they wrote, pregnancy is not a disease and elective abortions are not health care. Because pregnancy is a result of voluntary and consensual sexual intercourse, they write, students shouldn't be allowed to get time off to get an abortion. And if they disobey and miss class, the filing continues, the professors should be allowed to flunk them. Additionally, Bonavac says that he has the right to refuse to employ a teaching assistant who has had an abortion, calling women who have had abortions criminals. The problem that they have is that Title IX, which is federal law, it was signed into law by President Nixon back in 1972. Title IX gives specific protections to students and teachers in educational space. And one of those specific protections is that you must treat women the same as you treat men. Now, men don't ask for time off to get abortions, but they do ask for medical time off. And so the issue at play here is whether taking time off to get an abortion is actually medical time off or criminal time off, in the words of these two professors. And one of them also, they also in their filing, they said that they are upset that they're not allowed to punish students for, quote, for being homosexual or transgender. And they also want to be able to penalize teaching assistants for, quote, cross-dressing, in other words, being trans. This is where it's going to get interesting. These guys, these two professors teach in Austin, Texas. Amarillo, Texas is hundreds of miles away. But they filed this lawsuit in Amarillo, Texas, because Donald Trump appointed Matthew Kacsmaryk to the federal bench in Amarillo, Texas. And Matthew Kacsmaryk is this right-wing anti-abortion, formerly an anti-abortion lawyer, now an anti-abortion judge. He's the judge who ruled that mifepristone should not be approved by the Food and Drug Administration and needs to be taken off the market. He's the judge who is pushing the idea of enforcing the Comstock Act. He's the judge who wants women to be second-class citizens, as obviously do these two professors. And so it's a 486-mile trip from Austin to Amarillo, but that's where they went. And, you know, they're hopeful that Matthew Kacsmaryk will rule in their favor. So stay tuned. We'll probably get a ruling on this in the next month or so. And I think it's going to be really interesting. I think it's going to be very, very interesting. Meanwhile, final story here, and then I'll pick up your calls. 10 Republican senators have now said, in response to Donald Trump being convicted of 34 felonies in court in New York, 10 Republican senators have said, we're not going to take it. We're going to grind the Senate to a halt because of Alvin Bragg. And the 10 senators are Mike Lee, J.D. Vance, Tommy Tuberville, Eric Schmidt, Marsha Blackburn, Rick Scott, Roger Marshall, Marco Rubio, Josh Hawley, and Ron Johnson. And they say in this letter to, I'm not sure who it's to, I think it's to all of us. They say the White House has made a mockery of the rule of law and fundamentally altered our politics in un-American ways. As if the White House had anything to do with what Alvin Bragg does. I didn't know that Alvin Bragg took his marching orders from Joe Biden, you know, and frankly, he doesn't, and we all know that. In fact, both Alvin Bragg and Joe Biden have confirmed that in the last 24 hours. But in any case, they go on to say, as a Senate Republican conference, we are unwilling to aid and abet the White House in its project to tear this country apart. To that end, we will not, one, allow any increase in non-security relating funding for this administration or any appropriations bills which funds partisan lawfare. Two, vote to confirm this administration's political and judicial appointees. And 3, allow expedited consideration and passage of Democrat legislation or authorities that are not directly relevant to the safety of the American people. Sounds like a pretty serious threat, doesn't it? Here's the problem. They've been doing this for 2 years now, for almost 2 years now. Well, arguably they've been doing it longer than that. They've been doing it for almost 4 years now. These 10 senators, along with several of their buddies, they routinely filibuster every single piece of legislation the Democrats bring forward. They routinely refuse to vote for non-security related bills. They routinely refuse to confirm judges and political and judicial appointees. And they routinely ignore or fight against expedited consideration and passage of legislation. So nothing's changed. But, you know, we've got these 10 senators just whining, and they're so upset that Donald Trump committed crimes and he got caught trying to steal, well, not trying, successfully stealing the 2016 election. I mean, this is the thing that this was the number one thing about Donald Trump's trial here in New York State, or New York City, that makes me crazy, is that what he is charged with is denying you and me, the American public, denying us, denying Republican voters the right to know about his moral turpitude, basically. After the Access Hollywood tape came out, 3 weeks before the election, as I recall, 3 or 4 weeks before the election, a number of Republicans stood up on their hind legs for a brief moment in time and said, Donald Trump needs to step down and Mike Pence needs to be our nominee. A bunch of them, including some of these senators. And then, of course, you know, Melania Trump suggested that they should just say it's locker room talk, and, you know, it kind of just passed. Well, it wouldn't have just passed if the following, and in fact, actually, the day that the Access Hollywood tape came out, an hour after the Access Hollywood tape came out, Julian Assange, in coordination with the Kremlin, released the Hillary Clinton emails and the emails from one of the other big Democratic bigwigs at the time, which completely shifted the storyline. And then, of course, 2 weeks later, you had Jim Comey coming out, you know, the head of the FBI, the Republican-appointed head of the FBI, lifelong Republican, saying, oh, and we're going to look into Hillary. Had instead the story been the story that both Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels were trying to sell to the National Enquirer, had the story been, oh, and by the way, while his wife was nursing their son, they'd only been married a year and a half, less than 2 years. While his wife was nursing their son, he was porking a porn star and a Playboy bunny. Donald Trump would not have become president. He succeeded in stealing the 2016 election with these bribes. And the media just doesn't talk about it like that.